Football's golden oldies from the Toll House in Lancaster. Part 1 of the great Dixie Dean story. And before you watch it, can I ask you to subscribe and hit the notification button. Football on Merseyside magazine said this: it was a story of a goal-scoring legend. Dixie Dean was a player of great loyalty and influence, practicing his skill with the same determination, whether for a winning or losing side. He had, as centre-forwards must have, great courage. As a player, Dean combined power with grace, intuition and intellect. His shots were both vicious and accurate, and he was a brilliant header of the ball. Dean was a shrewd tactician and a master of positional play, which meant that, like all great stylists, he was in the right place at the right time. The tumults of the years of depression stood still while Everton won the Championship of Division 2 and the FA Cup. Where was this legend born? The plot of land where the house 313 on Laird Street, North Birkenhead, once stood today, lies sadly unkept. There is a covering of grass and a few dandelions sprouting from the ground, but nothing else. It seems remarkable as, on a beautiful spring morning, the sense of history is tangible. For it was here that English football's greatest goal scorer was brought into the world on January 22nd, 1907. And it was from here that William Ralph Dean would set off every week on the journey that would take him to immortality. A Star is Born. On January 22nd, 1907, a boy named William Ralph Dean was born into a family of 4 girls at 313 Laird Street, Birkenhead. The photograph was taken in 2022 when Jim Bentley, a great friend of mine, and Max, his son, went for a haircut. His father was an engine driver. In fact, he had driven the Royal Train, a very respected occupation in Edwardian times. At school, however, Bill developed talents in another direction, which fortunately for the sporting world, were soon to be recognised. At about 9 years old, his life was dominated by football, and he would train alone. He was 12 when he played centre-forward for Birkenhead boys against Liverpool boys at Prenton Park in a 6-1 defeat. "18 goals in a single day. Age 13, he played in a Birkenhead boys trial starting at 9 o'clock in the morning, scored 6, then got on his bike to Birkenhead Park to play another game at 11 o'clock, scored another 6, before playing for Melville in the afternoon, another 6, grand total 18. As a scholar, he could write a bit, but couldn't put 2 and 2 together, so he spent all his time playing football, as well as truant, for which his headmaster promised him a good hiding. One afternoon, all the boys were called into the main hall, where the headmaster said, 'William Ralph Dean, come forward.' Bill thought he was going to get the promised good hiding, but a man from the education office said, 'I'm here to present you with a medal for playing for Birkenhead boys.' Bill asked the teacher if he could go home to show his mother the medal, but he stayed away for 3 days to celebrate. Great times. And you know, Billy Dean always kept that treasured medal up to the day he died. There was one other boy in the team who turned professional, Ellis Rimmer, who went to Tranmere and on to Sheffield Wednesday, where he won the same medals as Dixie, as well as scoring in every round of the FA Cup. leaving school and going to work. Dixie was 14 years old when he left school to be an apprentice fitter at Wirral Railways. He worked shifts and the other two apprentices didn't like the night shift, so Bill volunteered just because it gave him more time to practice his skills and play football during the day. He played for the Wirral Railways team as well as a good local side called Pensby United in the Wirral combination. A Tranmere Rovers scout, Dunk Lee, asked him if he would like to join Tranmere. Bill, aged 17, went to see the Tranmere secretary manager, Bert Cook, who signed him quickly for £4 5 a week, a huge rise from 12 shillings a week at Wirral Railways. The season was almost over, so Bill only played in a couple of games. In hospital again by a cowardly act, Bill would come alive on Saturday and he scored 27 goals for Tranmere in 33 games, but his career was almost over before it began. As a 17-year-old, he was kicked viciously in the groin during a game against Rochdale at Prenton Park. He'd already scored 2 goals when a defender called Davy Parks took umbrage to what was happening and it hit him so hard Bill passed out, was taken to hospital and had a testicle removed. 17 years later, so Dean recalled, he met Parks in a bar in Chester, and this time it was Davy Parks who ended up in hospital. Clearly, Dean was a hard man, but always played the game fairly, never being booked in his career, but Parks deserved everything that put him in hospital. Full-time professional at last. In 1924-25 he played in 27 games for Tranmere, netting 27 goals. So they increased his wages to £5 a week in the season, but nothing in the summer months. Bill had been advised that by dribbling the ball up the field he was liable to get rough treatment, especially from older players. Sure enough, in a game against Rochdale, he'd scored 2 when the centre-half said, "They'll score no more bloody goals today, lad." Next time Bill approached him, he received a kick between the legs, passed out and was rushed to hospital where he had a testicle removed. Some time later when he was at Everton, he spotted the accused across the bar and went over, exacted severe retribution that laid him out stone cold. So that story is, I always think, worth relating twice. He got a job on Laird Street delivering milk, so he got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, collected the milk at 5 and then delivered it. In 1925-26 in the 3rd Division North he began to get noticed by the senior clubs, and after playing an away game at Ashington he was approached by Newcastle United, followed quickly by Aston Villa and Arsenal, but the answer was always a resounding no. He was only ever going to play for one team, and that was Everton, after he attended one game at Goodison Park with his father in 1914-15. Bill went to the pictures one afternoon, and when he returned, his father and mother were waiting with Bert Cook, who said to him, "Would you like to play for Everton?" Bill's mind was made up there and there. The meeting at the Woodside Hotel in Birkenhead. Tom McIntosh, Everton secretary, was waiting for him. No manager in those days. McIntosh didn't have time to speak as Bill said to him, "I'll take whatever you give me because Everton is where I want to go." Everton paid £3,000 for Dixie, and Bert Cook had promised Bill and his parents 10% when they sold him, but of course they lied and gave him a pitiful 1%, £30. Bill appealed to the president of the Football League, John McKenna, also chairman of Liverpool, but to no avail, which wasn't surprising. John McKenna's name appears in the Herbert Chapman talk later this year, and it was highly likely he was involved in match fixing the Liverpool versus Man United game in 1914-15. When, 13 years later, Everton sold Bill to Notts County, they would get the £3,000 back, so he actually cost them nothing but his wages. Now that is the bargain of a century. Dixie's journey to Goodison Park. From Laird Street, it's 2 miles down to the Woodside Ferry Terminal. When Dixie had a game at Goodison Park, Dean would run the distance with his boots slung over his shoulder, hop on board a boat to cross the Mersey, then catch the 45 tram with fans from Water Street up to the stadium. Can you imagine that happening now? And this is what has been lost to the game for me and countless numbers of my friends. It will never return, and that is why I will stay forever in the past, from 1872 to 1972. I am not interested in football today. On to Goodison Park. When Bill joined Everton on March 16, 1925, he went straight into the first team on £6 a week. Stars of the side were wingers Sammy Chizoy and Alex Troop, and you can see the three guys in the photographs there. Both wingers would supply Bill with a bag full of goals, and both Alex and Sammy said, "When you see us going down the wing, we want you to go to the far corner of the penalty area, allowing you to run in and find our crosses coming to you." Bill was not as tall as many of the centre halves marking him at 5'11", because many of them were 6'2" and above, but he never had any difficulty at all in out-jumping them. In fact, they were often coming down as Bill was going up. Dixie proves his potential. His first game in 1925-26 was a reserve game against Bradford City at Goodison Park, when Bill netted 7, moving him immediately into the first team. At the end of April 1926, Everton finished in the middle of the table, having played 42, won 12, lost 12, drawn 18. 72 goals for, 70 against, 42 points. Everton played an unbelievable 27 players throughout the season in an effort to find success. Everton knew one thing though: they had unearthed a great centre forward. Dixie played in 38 league games, scoring 32, almost 50% of their total. At the time, Everton's first division record was 38 goals, held by Bert Freeman, and the cry of football fans was, "Give it to Dixie," and it was gathering momentum. Sammy Chedzoy would hit the ball across with power, and Bill could head them from outside the box into the net, while Alex Troop would hang the ball in the air, giving Dixie time to climb above defenders and score. You don't see any centre forwards scoring a headed goal from outside the penalty area nowadays. Out for 5 months before the 1926-27 season. Before the start of this season, however, Bill had an accident on his motorbike, which might have ended his career before it had started. He was riding his bike through Holywell with his girlfriend on the pillion when a car cut in towards him. Bill had the choice of going down the mountain or through the windscreen, but just before the crash, he turned round and pushed his girlfriend off the bike. She suffered a damaged ankle, but Bill fractured his skull, broke a cheekbone and fractured his jaw in 2 places. He woke up in the workhouse in Holywell with his jaw in splints, as there wasn't a hospital there at the time. Bill was unconscious for 36 hours, and it was over a week before he was transferred to a Liverpool hospital, where Dr. Baxter claimed he would never play football again. Soon afterwards, Everton arranged to transfer Bill to a nursing home. Towards the end of his stay, Tom McIntosh, the Everton secretary, visited Bill and found him up a tree, knocking apples down for the nurses. "If you're well enough to do that, you can come back and play football," said Tom. So that's what Bill did. Back on the field 15 weeks later. In October 1926, he turned out for the reserves at Huddersfield, and a special trainload of Everton fans followed him, as they heard he would never play again. And that was how much Evertonian fans followed their team. They would go to the ends of the earth to see Bill. Harry Cook, the trainer, was worried what would happen when Bill first headed the very heavy ball, but Teddy Critchley, the right winger, crossed the ball after 15 minutes. Dixie leapt up and headed it. The net bulged, and he never felt anything wrong as a result of the accident the rest of his career. He could head a ball from 20 yards and shoot with either foot from 35 to 40 yards, leaving goalkeepers helpless. Just think for a moment about these astonishing facts, and all we've heard for the last 12 months is Harry Kane and his ability. He's not in the same class as Dixie D. Dixie, 20 years of age, made his debut for England at Hampden Park on April 2nd, 1927, scoring both goals in a 2-1 win in front of 111,000. Prior to the game, a Yorkshire cotton millionaire, Tim Patton, offered the players a £10 win bonus, plus £10 to the scorer of a goal. So Dixie picked up £30, 5 weeks' pay. The pay for representing England was £6 or a medal or a cap. You had to make a choice, and they were making a fortune out of international football. 1927-28, 60 glorious goals from a lad aged 20. Bill resisted all the attractions and off-field influences and retained a level head, and his feet never left the ground, metaphorically speaking, of course. He always paid tribute to his colleagues in the Everton team, and they, in turn, were inspired by Dean's own performances, and that is why Dixie Dean was great. He inspired those around him. Everton opened the 1927-28 season playing Sheffield United at Goodison Park, and in a 4-0 victory, Dixie scored after 75 minutes. He was the most lively and enthusiastic player on the field, banishing the memories of 12 months ago when he had been lying in hospital in a critical condition, his life hanging in the balance. The second game of the season saw newly promoted Middlesbrough entertain Everton. Everton lost 4-2. Dixie scored 1, but George Campsell, whose record of 59 goals Dixie was trying to beat, scored all 4 of Middlesbrough's goals. I could have given the entire talk on this one season, which no matter how many times I read the chapter, I still do not believe it, as it seems like fiction, not fact. Five in the first half and then the 55th derby game. In a game against Man United, Bill was in a rush to get a cup of tea at half-time, so he scored 5 in the first half in a 5-2 win. And a fantastic photograph there of them coming out for the derby game. In Bill's opinion, Elisha Scott was the greatest of all goalkeepers, and Bill would send him a package containing a bottle of aspirin before every derby match, with the message saying, "Get a good sleep tonight, Elisha, I'll be there tomorrow." The game ended 1-1, with Alex Troop scoring for the Toffees and Bill being tightly marked by Liverpool's Jimmy Parson Jackson, who would go on to be a vicar. Dixie and Elisha, friends and enemies. I remember once playing at Anfield, and as I went in the players' entrance, I met Elisha, who said, "You'll get no goals today, you black-headed so-and-so," to which I replied, "If I don't lick you today, I'm going back to work on the railway." I scored 3 goals in the first 9 minutes, and Elisha's language was unbelievable, and the things he called me you could not repeat. Jimmy Parson Jackson, who couldn't stand Elisha's language, said to Dixie after the 3rd goal went in, "William, I shall never play in front of this man again." Jimmy Jackson was born in Newcastle in 1900 and played 405 games for Queen's Park, Motherwell, Aberdeen and Liverpool, 212 goal appearances for Liverpool, before becoming a Presbyterian minister in 1933. But he couldn't stand Elisha's language. Dixie and Elisha met for the first time in 21 years in the Dublin Packet a few weeks after Liverpool's 4-0 win over Everton in 1955. When Dixie saw his old friend and said, "It can't be." "Yes, it is. He's come back to haunt me." And Elisha replied, "I hear you turned green after Liverpool's win over Everton." It was great banter between the two of them. Dixie's momentous duels with the Ulsterman in Liverpool's goal will never be forgotten, and neither will the two protagonists. Three games to play, 9 goals needed. It's impossible. It can't happen. The game against Aston Villa saw him score 2. Then he scored 4 against Burnley. So all he needed was a hat-trick against Arsenal to break the record. May 5th, 1928. Fans packed Goodison Park, despite the fact that they had already clinched the title. Dixie scored inside 5 minutes. Then 25 minutes later, Everton were awarded a penalty. Dixie scored again. 8 minutes to go, and the score was 2-2, and 60,000 fans were nervous wrecks. Alex True, the international winger, takes a corner, and the grainy photograph, and this is apparently the only surviving photograph of that 60th goal. It shows Dixie soaring above the Arsenal defence. When he came down, football history had been made. The roar could have been heard on the Wirral. At the end of this talk, I'll explain the dramatic, unbelievable events behind this game. The final league table and unbelievable stats. Just look at Everton sitting proudly on the top of the league, a couple of points in front of Huddersfield. It's worth taking a moment to look at the statistics and remember the game was played on mud. Players wore heavy boots. Just look at the photograph of Dixie's boots, and you didn't go down unless you were really injured, unlike the superstars of today. They roll about on the floor like they've broken both legs. Dixie didn't become one of the best centre forwards we have ever seen by accident. He practiced non-stop from the age of 5 and was a great athlete actually. He was a very good cricketer, a scratch golfer, very good at playing baseball for the Liverpool Caledonians, and beat a powder-hole sprinter at air races over 100 yards in pumps and his underpants. Freddie Tarbuck, a bookmaker, and Jimmy's dad arranged his handicap and won £1,000, a fortune in those days, saying to Bill, "Please don't tell the wife, Bill." Everton began to struggle. The championship team hit the heights thanks to Dixie's 60 goals. He was also top scorer in 28-29, 26 in 30 games, but Dixie had a bone taken out of his foot. First came back, injured, so back to the same nursing home for a cartilage operation. Top scorer again in 1929-30, 25 in 27 games, but couldn't save Everton from relegation. In his career, Dixie had 15 operations, and Harry Cook, the trainer, seemed to spend his life at Dixie's bedside. Harry pickled all the bones and cartilage, put them in a container, which was an old jam jar, and showed them to all the new players who joined the club, saying, "This is what you have to be prepared to do to bring success to this wonderful club." Second Division football. Everton would win the second division by 7 points from West Bromwich Albion, with Dixie scoring 51 goals in 42 league and cup games. Everton had signed 3 forwards and 3 defenders to face the challenge, and they really set the second division on fire. Tommy Johnson and Jimmy Dunn, the inside forwards, scored 40 goals from Dixie heading the ball down for them. Dixie took a battering again, but never complained, and he was proud of the fact that he was never cautioned, and he was only spoken to once by a referee, and you can see him now, Lol Harper, who was also called the Knight of the Whistle. Lol called Dixie over in a game, and Dixie thought, "What have I done now?" And Lol said, "Do you want a mint to suck, Billy?" And Dixie replied, "Yeah, thanks very much, Lol." And that was the only time he spoke to a referee. Wedding bells in the summer of 1931. Ethel Fossard was courting a young man who became seriously ill and died, but Bill knew him well as a neighbour. Bill attended the funeral where he first spoke to Ethel, and their friendship grew from then on. After a short time, Bill popped the question, and the marriage was arranged. They didn't go to some exotic hotel, but went on a tour of racetracks in Britain by mutual consent. Bill certainly liked the horses. Ethel was a beautiful girl, tender and gentle, who would have 3 sons and a daughter by Bill. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of the Dixie Dean story.